My name is Glynn Raby, R-A-B-Y. I was a sergeant at the end of the war. I finished high school in June of 1942. I was not 18 until the last day of November of that year. Like so many 18-year-old boys, I wanted to be a hotshot fighter pilot. And to do that, they had a program for aviation cadets. You had to be 18. So I started to college and also worked part-time and until I was 18. And a short time after that, a week or two, something like that, I went to the recruiting office. It explained that I wanted to join the aviation cadets, and I was told that no more enlistments were being accepted at that time for any of the services. And that I asked the officer, how can I join the Air Corps? He said, the only thing you can do now is to go to your draft board and ask them to send you early, which they will do. He also said that they will send a letter saying you are voluntarily inducted and requesting the Air Corps, but there are no guarantees. You go and they will put you where they want you, but they will consider putting you in the Air Corps. So I went to the draft board and they told me they would send me, but they had the January and February allotments already determined, and so they said the 1st of March is the first time you could go. So I was drafted, and I was sent to the Army, and which the Air Corps was a part of the Army, and I was interviewed, and I mentioned to the non-commissioned officer who interviewed me about the situation, about the letter and all, and he just nodded his head yes, and so I don't know if a letter was ever written, but anyway, I went in March of 1943. I was sent to Fort Jackson in the state of South Carolina, and joined a new infantry division that was just being activated. It was the 106th Infantry Division, and I spent about a year, just a little over a year with them in basic training, advanced training, field maneuvers, and of short duration, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, things like that. And then about the 1st of January 1944, we went into Middle Tennessee on maneuvers that lasted 2.5 months or so, and we were out in the open the entire time, and it was winter time, and so we got a little bit of experience as to what we were to realize later in the Battle of the Bulge. And so along about the 1st of March 1944, the invasion of Normandy was being planned, and it was a big secret as to when and where and all that, but they knew they were going to have a lot of casualties. So they took a lot of people out of units that were in the United States and sent them overseas to be replacements for casualties expected during that invasion. And so I landed in Glasgow, Scotland in late May of 1944, and on D-Day they announced that the invasion had been launched and that they needed blood donors, so they asked all of us that would to volunteer to donate blood, and I think everybody did. We joked about the fact that we might get our own blood back, but we didn't. In a short time after that, I found myself in Normandy. In fact, they moved the entire replacement camp over there, and from there they took people out every day to go to various units to fill up the vacancies caused by the casualties that they had. And I was sent to the 2nd Infantry Division in Normandy, and I don't know the exact date, but it wasn't too long after the invasion. Okay, in the 106th Infantry Division, I was assigned to a headquarters company of a of the 423rd Infantry Regiment. When I left them, and for a while I was in this replacement camp, and then when I joined the 2nd Infantry Division, I was placed in the H Company of the 9th Infantry Regiment in the 2nd Infantry Division. I can think of two right now that really had an impact on me. And one, after we left Normandy, we went to the west over into Brittany. The armor that had broken out of Normandy, part of it went to the west, and the Germans retreated into cities, primarily seaports, and in the city of Brest, in the northwest corner of France, the Germans had a huge submarine base. And so we and the 2nd Infantry Division and the 8th and the 29th Divisions all went over there to capture that town. And outside the town, I was assigned to help the communications sergeant with his communication between our company and the battalion. And he operated radio, and sometimes I did, and we at times used walkie-talkie radios, and then a big radio that was used to communicate to the battalion and back. And one day, they had hedgerows there similar to the ones in Normandy, not quite as high, but they're still formidable defensive things for the Germans to use. Anyway, we had dug holes to get in, which we did all the time, and he was lying in the hole he had dug, and I was 2 meters away in the one that I dug, and all of a sudden a mortar shell came over and hit him right in the midsection of his body, and of course it killed him right away, and that was quite traumatic. I remember that very well. The other one that comes to mind is not as bad really, but after the Bulge was over and we started advancing again through Germany, it was in February of 1945. At night we had stopped outside a small village in Germany, and I don't know the name of it, but by then I had been assigned to one of the machine gun platoons as instrument corporal, and my rank at that time was corporal, and my duties were to maintain contact communications between the squads. There were 2 sections, each had 2 squads, and between them and the platoon leader, who was a first lieutenant, and the platoon sergeant, who was a technical sergeant. And we moved into this village right after dawn. We had been attacking all the time, and then we stopped for a while, and cold and snow and all that sort of thing, and so our company, we usually followed right closely behind the rifle companies, and so we went into this small village, and the platoon sergeant told me that he had gotten some information. He expected that we would be able to stay there for several hours and maybe, overnight. He didn't know, but he said we need to get some buildings for our platoon personnel. He pointed out to a small 2-story house that had a cellar, and he said, I'm going upstairs and you go downstairs and check it. So up the stairs he went, down into the cellar I went. There was no electricity, and it was very dark. The only light came from the stairway, and the cellar had been divided into 2 sections with a concrete block wall, and there was a doorway right at the bottom of the steps to one of them. And there was a doorway, there was no door, and there was a blanket over the opening, and I pulled the blanket back a little bit, and all I could see was 2 sets of feet, at least 2. I don't know if I saw 3, but I saw 2 sets of feet with just stockings on, and they were evidently lying on something and asleep maybe. Anyway, my first thought was that's one of our rifle company's people that beat us to this house. So I reached down and shook a foot, and I asked what outfit, what unit is it, expecting F company, G company, whatever, and someone answered in German, and it scared the heck out of me. So I ducked back behind that wall, threw the safety off of my rifle, which made a lot of noise in the silence, and I said, "Does anyone speak English?" And someone to the rear of the room answered, "I speak English." And I said, "Up the stairs with your hands up." And I dashed up the stairs and hollered at the sergeant, and he came down. We went outside, and there were 7 German soldiers surrendered to us. And as I look back on it, they were probably worn out, tired, and ready to surrender, and that's all that they were doing. Otherwise, they would have had a lookout that would have alerted them and when they first sighted us. But that was somewhat traumatic. I landed in Normandy several days, maybe 2 weeks after the invasion. And was in a replacement camp at that time. And shortly after that, I was in the 2nd Division. And I don't know the exact dates, and in our records center, Army Records Center in St. Louis, some years after the war, and before many of us started looking for information, they had a huge fire that destroyed so many records, and mine was one of them. So I don't know the exact dates on those. World War II ended in Europe in May the 8th. Our division was scheduled to go to the Pacific to fight, and they had a point system where they gave points for months of service, months overseas service, decorations, dependents, and all of that sort of thing. And some of the people had been in much longer than I, older, and had family and that, and got more decorations and things than I did. And so they took those people out of our division and brought people in with lower points from other units. And we left Czechoslovakia in June, and we moved over to France to get ready to go to the Pacific. And they gave us 30 days leave at home. We went home on a troop ship, and I was at home with my family for 30 days, and all I could think of was the possibility of going back into combat, which was terrible, and I did not want to do it, and I did not know how I could avoid it, but I was trying to figure that out. And while I was at home on leave, the atomic bombs were dropped on Japan, and then later Japan surrendered, so we did not have to go. And so, since we were here, and the people that really had should have been discharged before us were still over here in Europe waiting on a ride home. And so they started discharging us, and my name came up in late October, and I was discharged October the 25th, 1945. Okay, I was here in 1945, of course, and in 1989, June of 1989, I came with a group of 2nd Infantry Division veterans and a few family members on a 3-week trip. We supposedly retraced our footsteps from Normandy to Czechoslovakia. And we went to Normandy, we went to Brittany, we went through Germany, parts of it where we were and all, and then we came into Plzeň in June of 1989. We spent 2 nights in Plzeň, and then we went on to Prague and flew home. And while we were in Plzeň, it was still under the communist domination, and it was just not a happy place, and the signs that we looked around, and no construction work, no repair work had been done. I did see a lot of, not just in Plzeň, but in other towns that we went, a lot of scaffolding on the outside of the buildings where they had, I guess before the Americans pulled out, that they had started some renovations and that sort of thing, but then it stopped, and even the floorboards that were on those metal scaffolding units was had been there so long and in the weather so long that some of it had rotted. But now this time it's been a different situation. It's a happy place.